On June 10th, 1991, ABC aired the season 2 finale of Twin Peaks. There were no plans for a third season. As I discussed in my first video, which explores the making of Twin Peaks, the cancellation stemmed from several factors, most notably Lynch's clashes with the constraints of network television and ABC's own self-sabotage of the series. But the series finale was an instant classic. Despite distancing himself from the show for a time, David Lynch returned and brought it to a dramatic conclusion. The final scene left viewers with a chilling and tantalizing cliffhanger. So, when Lynch announced plans for a Twin Peaks film, it would not be unfair to assume it would pick up right where we left off. A re-immersion into the world of Twin Peaks, the mystery, the kookiness and hijinks, everything that we, as a viewing audience, loved about the original series. How about instead, a prequel? An incredibly dark tale of abuse behind closed doors, offering a deep dive into the final 7 days of Laura Palmer's life? The announcement of a prequel is a bold and courageous choice, one that viewers and critics alike, for the most part, absolutely hated. Welcome to the making of Fire Walk With Me.
You think you know Twin Peaks? The killer will strike again.
Burst into fire.
You're wrong.
Before we get into the creation of the film, I want to take a moment to recognize the book that did it first. The Secret Diary of Laura Palmer is a spin-off novel from the television series. It was written by Jennifer Lynch, the daughter of David Lynch, when she was just 22. The diary was published in 1990 between seasons 1 and 2. It details Laura's life from the age of 12 up until her death at age 17.
I was called at my home and asked to meet my father and Mark Frost at Mark's house. I was brought into one of the back rooms, and the door was closed, and there was a moment of silence before I was told that I was one of 3 air-breathing mammals to know who the killer was. And I won't say specifically what I was told, but I can tell you that I was then one of 3 smiling people in that room. I was given a list of characters to create in the diary, and I was given a semblance of ideas, certainly about where the show was going to go. But the beauty of it was that, in fact, in the same meeting during which I was told who the killer was to be, I was given so much creative freedom, and I was just told basically, these are the people that we need to have mentioned, and do with them what you will. So it was a real gift. I mean, I really got to build Laura as I wanted to. It was a good feeling.
After finishing the diary, I can confidently say that the book has several narrative differences from the film. Although David Lynch may not have used the book in his work, Sheryl Lee studied it to prepare for her performance in Fire Walk With Me.
When you found out your dad was going to be making Fire Walk With Me,
Yes.
Did you think that maybe he was going to adapt part of the diary?
I did not know. I know that Sheryl Lee said that she used the diary to be ready to make the movie, which is a real compliment to me.
Right.
I don't know, truth be told, I don't think my father ever read the diary.
Oh, okay.
So, which is both totally expected and a little sad.
David Lynch's Wild at Heart premiered at the Cannes Film Festival on May 19, 1990, where it won the prestigious Palme d'Or.
La Palme d'Or 90, Wild at Heart, de David
In the audience that day was a man named Francis Bouygues, a French businessman who just that year had started up his own movie production company, Sibi 2000. After watching Wild at Heart, Francis knew that he wanted to produce a Lynch film of his very own. Now, Francis was not a man lacking in money, not in any way, shape, or form. He had founded a construction business named after himself, Bouygues, which at this point was the largest in the world, and still to this day is a mammoth, bringing in nearly $39 billion in revenue in 2021. So suffice it to say, he had a lot of money to throw at some art house films. Francis was introduced to Lynch not long after Cannes through a man named Pierre Edelman, who was an old acquaintance of Lynch's, and now at this point had his own company, B Entertainment. Let's hear it from David himself. Pierre Edelman is an adventurer and a character and my oldest French friend, and he played a part in many of my films. Pierre has a company called B Entertainment, and he wears a little bee pin on his lapel, and Pierre is a bee. He pollinates. He'll put this person together with that person, and he's done this for countless numbers of people. So he told me at Cannes that Francis Boyd loved Wild at Heart, and that he had a new company and wanted to meet me. David Lynch flew with his team, Tom Hansen and Tony Krantz, to Paris. It was there they would meet at the Maison du Caviar with Pierre. It would turn out to be a very wild night, as Pierre had brought a number of girls out, while the group, especially Tony, threw down cherry vodkas. According to Lynch, Tony puked his guts out at the curb. I could see him out the window puking into the snow. So on the day of the big meeting, Lynch was alone, as Tony and Tom stayed back at the hotel, recovering from their wild night. But the movie in discussion on this day was not yet a Twin Peaks film. It was actually Lynch's long-standing script, Ronnie Rocket. David Lynch tells the story. Tom and Tony didn't show up at this meeting, so there I was without my team. And right across from me was Mr. Boyd, and on either side of him there were these two French guys that worked for him. These guys were the swarmiest lowlifes, and they were looking at me with these smiles that said, "We're going to crucify you." They didn't like Boyd going into the film business, and the vibe coming off of them was so bad. At a certain point, Mr. Boyd said, "Tell me the story of Ronnie Rocket." And it was sort of like, if you don't tell me, then there's no deal. Prove yourself. Those assholes sitting next to him with those French smiles on their faces. The worst part of France is this certain smugness. And it says so much, those smiles. I'm sitting there looking right at Mr. Boyd, and Pierre is standing there translating, and these guys were quiet. When I stopped talking, there was silence. Then Mr. Boyd said, "Bon," and that was it. The deal was done. I just had to do the dog and pony show. He said yes to Ronnie Rocket, but when it comes down to it, I've always been afraid to make that film. Something isn't right with the script, and I don't know what it is. Plus, I started thinking about Laura Palmer then. I don't know why I love Laura Palmer, but I just loved her, and I wanted to go back and see what she was going through during those days before she died. I wanted to stay in the world of Twin Peaks, but it was a strange time. People were put off Twin Peaks at that point, so it was a hard sell. Boyd went for Fire Walk with Me, but other people in the business wouldn't have done it. In the world of show business, things sometimes creep at a glacial pace and other times fly at breakneck speed, and the production for Fire Walk with Me would fall under the latter. By the time the last episode of Season 2 of Twin Peaks aired on June 10th, the wheels for Fire Walk with Me were already well in motion. They had a strict deadline since the film was set to premiere at Cannes in May the following year. But let's make one thing clear. David Lynch, in many ways, was on his own here. This movie was his baby, and unfortunately, it was not a very popular one. From the jump, Mark Frost, co-creator of Twin Peaks, was not interested. He and David's interest in the world of Twin Peaks had significantly diverged, and Frost had no desire to make a prequel when all of the show's fans were clamoring for the story to move forward, not backward. Mark Frost would later recall, "I was not involved at all. David and I had a disagreement about what direction a movie should go. I felt very strongly that our audience wanted to see the story go forward, so I declined to be involved in the movie." He subsequently left the production to work on his own feature film, Storyville, which coincidentally would later open in the US on the same day as Fire Walk with Me.
The candidate, the seduction, the murder. It all happens in Storyville. Directed by Mark Frost. Storyville, rated R.
So it was not Mark Frost David would team up with, but with writer Robert Ingalls, who contributed significantly to Twin Peaks, though primarily in Season 2. The only Season 1 episode that he wrote was Episode 4, The One-Armed Man. though he was one of the writers for the unforgettable finale episode along with Frost and Harley Payton.
I really loved the world of Twin Peaks, and I, along with others, fell in love with Laura Palmer. After Wild at Heart, I got the urge to go back into that world and experience the last week of Laura Palmer's life. That was the idea, and that started the film Fire Walk with Me that I wrote with Bob Engels. Back up into Washington, beautiful, beautiful forests and that mood of Twin Peaks. And we shot, I think, in the summer. It was warmer. It was a different feel, still a Twin Peaks feel, but a little bit brighter and not as wet, and certainly not as cold. The Twin Peaks pilot, we were freezing. Sheryl Lee was spectacular. And if people see that film again, just look at what she did. So fantastic. And Sarah Palmer and Leland Palmer, the whole bunch back into the world of Twin Peaks.
They began writing the movie in June of 1991. According to Ingalls, it was a real pleasant experience, and fast. I think we wrote it in 3 weeks or something like that. But the rest would not be smooth sailing. The script was in place, the story was set, and despite revolving mostly around Laura Palmer's life, the script still leaned heavily on the show's most iconic character, Agent Dale Cooper. So unfortunately, things very abruptly hit a wall when Kyle MacLachlan expressed that he was not interested in reprising his role. On July 11th, Ken Scherer, the CEO of Lynch Frost Productions, announced that the project would not go forward due to Kyle MacLachlan's refusal to participate. But why would Kyle turn down this role, the role that had thrust him even further into the limelight following Blue Velvet? Well, it's pretty much exactly what you would think, as summed up quite nicely in the following Lynch quote. Some of the Twin Peaks cast didn't want me to do it either. When an actor signs on for a series, they've got to make a commitment. And a lot of actors worry they're going to get known for just that role and nothing else will come along. A lot of actors in Twin Peaks wanted to move on for different reasons, and when the series ended, it gave people freedom, and they could go off to stardom or whatever. Along with this, Kyle has expressed that he felt some resentment towards Twin Peaks after Lynch and Frost abandoned the show for much of the second season. It was a world that Kyle, too, was very invested in, and he experienced the decline firsthand. Along with MacLachlan, Sherilyn Fenn and Laura Flynn Boyle also declined to participate in the film. Fenn would declare in an interview in 1995 that, "I was extremely disappointed in the way the second season of Twin Peaks got off track. As far as Fire Walk with Me, it was something I chose not to be a part of." But Lynch was not to be dissuaded. Every obstacle was an opportunity to dream up something new. So he revised the script to introduce new FBI agents. Chet Desmond, played by Chris Isaak, and Sam Stanley, played by Kiefer Sutherland. Step 1, somewhat hilariously, was simply replacing Cooper's name with that of Chet Desmond. Ingalls recalls, "The glory of the computer was that we just changed Cooper to Desmond in the script. We gave him an introduction, and we were prepared to do the whole sequel with just Chris. Things then evolved organically as Chet became his own character, and Sam was written in so the two characters could bounce off each other." Let's hear it again from Ingalls. "We rethought who this person was, and it became a full-blown person who we thought was pretty cool. Chet from Chet Baker and Desmond from Norma Desmond. It's a noir name." In regards to his last-minute casting, Kiefer Sutherland would say, "It was an odd time for me, working-wise and personally. I had kind of gone through a lot that year. I remember being really grateful that David Lynch had actually even thought of casting me in it, because I was a huge fan of his." A surprising star appearance in the film comes in the form of international sensation David Bowie. Bowie plays FBI agent Philip Jeffries, who escapes the Black Lodge only to mysteriously disappear again. Bowie transformed his Yorkshire speech into a deep Louisiana accent.
"In fact, we're not going to talk about Judy at all. We're going to keep her out of it."
Lynch recalls, "I have no idea how we got David Bowie in there, but I just love him. I don't think he liked his accent, though, probably because somebody told him that it's embarrassing or something. All it takes is one person to make a comment like that, and they can wreck something for you. He's great in it, though. Just great. David Bowie told the New York Times, "They crammed me. I did all my scenes in 4 or 5 days because I was in rehearsals for the 1991 Tin Machine tour." While Bowie's accent is admittedly over the top, it isn't scene ruining. Given the brief time he had on set, I'm impressed with the performance. In my view, it adds to the mystique of the character. As for why they chose Bowie for the role, Bob Ingalls explains that it was Lynch's assistant, Debbie Trutnick, who suggested him. When we were writing Fire Walk with Me at David's house, his assistant at the time would be in the other room, and she would come in to give David a phone message or something. She would hear what we were talking about, and she would always jokingly say, "as played by David Bowie." We'd always laugh. When we got done with the script, David said, "I think we should get Bowie." That's what that comes from. Of course, David being David, he could just call him up. It was pretty funny. Now, Kyle MacLachlan did end up reconsidering. He agreed to be in the movie, but in a diminished capacity. When somebody doesn't want to do something, it's not the end of the world. You think of something else, and I love that in a way. We had to rework the script, so we needed less from Kyle.
Won for Best Video for a Film, Wild at Heart, but really it's David Lynch who deserves the credit, and I could talk about it, but I'd rather talk to somebody who was in Wild at Heart. And what was it like working with David on Wild at Heart, Kyle?
Chris, I wasn't in Wild at Heart. He didn't ask me to do that.
After an incredibly hectic month of rewrites and disappointing conversations, the shooting script was finalized on August 8th, and thanks to the incredible speed in which Lynch and Ingalls worked, the movie was back on track. Principal photography would begin on location in Washington just under a month later, on September 5th.
The film is rated R and advertises that it goes beyond what was allowed on television.
It gets a lot wilder. It explains things in more detail because it's like a ride. David said to me before we started shooting, "Fasten your seatbelt," and he was right.
Lynch reassembled his team, bringing back Ron Garcia, the cinematographer of the series' pilot episode, along with longtime collaborators like composer Angelo Badalamenti and Patricia Norris. I failed to mention Norris in my last video, so you may not have ever heard of her. Patricia Norris was an Oscar-nominated and Emmy Award-winning costume and production designer. She often worked with David Lynch, serving as the costume designer for The Elephant Man, the production designer for Blue Velvet, and both the production and costume designer for Wild at Heart, Lost Highway, and of course, the Twin Peaks pilot. In 1990, she won an Emmy Award for Outstanding Costume Design for a Series for her work on the pilot episode of Twin Peaks. Norris transformed the field of costume design by demonstrating how powerful clothing can be in shaping a story. In an interview for IndieWire, David Lynch said, "She's got a tremendous talent for costumes. She's got exquisite taste. She always gets the job done. It's a magical thing when she dresses an actor and helps them to set the character. The clothes fit the characters perfectly on Elephant Man. She makes the character no matter what. She's done pretty much every film since then. When somebody comes out of the dressing room, they are the character. The clothes are perfect. She set the look of Twin Peaks. She's sort of perfect at everything she does." Her costume designs for Twin Peaks birthed new fashion trends. Many prominent designers, including Raf Simons, Marc Jacobs, and Gucci, have drawn inspiration from the clothing in Twin Peaks. In 2011, she received a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Art Directors Guild, as well as one from the Costume Designers Guild, making her the only person to be honored by both guilds. Now get ready to jump around a bit because we have a lot to cover. But to start, we are going to reference a day-to-day shooting diary by Charlotte Fraze, as provided on DougPud.com, as a broad outline. But first, a pressing question. Who is Charlotte Fraze and what was her role on set? I've checked IMDb, and there is a Charlotte Fraze who has worked extensively as a production manager for a number of French films, but she is not credited for Fire Walk with Me. But I still do believe that this is the same person, as she is credited for Lost Highway, but just under special thanks. If anyone has any more information on her and her role in Fire Walk with Me, I would love to hear it. Her very first diary entry, dated September 3rd, 1991, reads, D-Day -1, arrival of Special Agent Dale Cooper, alias Kyle MacLachlan. David Lynch, who wants his character to be as clean and respectable as possible, runs his fingers on the back of the actor's head to check the length of his hair and promises as a hello, "Not short enough yet." Thursday, September 5th, second day of shooting. Warm and relaxed atmosphere. David is calm and kindly, as heedful of the actor's performances as of the quality of sound. He follows the shooting sitting in front of a small video monitor. He often uses 2 cameras and prints a lot of takes that give him a wide range of possibilities for editing. Monday, September 9th, 5th day. Hospital scene. For the lighting of the room, Ron Garcia, the director of photography, only uses 5 kWA projectors. He often diffracts the light, multiplies the flags, and can wisely take his time for important sequences and be faster for minor scenes. Friday, September 13th, 9th day. The clash between Cliff Howard, the deputy, and Desmond, the agent, is shot with 3 cameras, one being mounted on a Steadicam. You can easily see that Chris Isaak has practiced boxing. His coordination is perfect. The hardest part is to hold back your blows, he confesses to me after having calmly but viciously twisted his antagonist's nose. Monday, September 16th, 11th day. On the Red Diamond Motel parking lot, David walks towards me, looking cheerful, rested, and ready to go. For the first time, he kisses me. That's nice, and makes me feel a little bit as part of the family. He's in a great mood and full of humor, joking with everybody on set. We'll take a moment to hear from Deepak Nayar, who had already worked on a number of Lynch projects, including Twin Peaks and Wild at Heart, and would also end up working on Lost Highway. One day, we were driving home from set, and David said, "Stop the car, Craig!" Then he said, "See that woman over there on the street? Get her telephone number." I said, "What for?" And he said, "I don't know, just get her number." So I did, and the matter was forgotten. A few days later, he says, "Remember when I told you to get that woman's telephone number? She's in the next scene with Harry Dean." She played the old woman who lives in the trailer park and says to Harry Dean, "Where's my hot water?"
Right where we left.
Where's my goddamn hot water?
Thursday, September 19th, 14th day. Location, the Double R Diner. Before the shooting of the pilot of the series, Twin Peaks, business was bad and the owner baked her own pies. Since she has hired 3 persons to handle the rush of tourists, Twin Peaks was a breath of oxygen for this underprivileged area, where the wood industry no longer provides sufficient work and income. A huge pile of sheets of paper sits on the counter. It's a petition to obtain prolongation of the series. Across the street, a souvenir shop sells mostly Twin Peaks sub-products, t-shirts, books, postcards, badges, etc. We shoot the scene where a mysterious old lady with her masked grandson offers an engraving to Laura Palmer. The woman has a surprising silhouette. Very tiny, she wears a dark suit and wears a little hat emphasizing her passé look. The little boy is just as bizarre, dressed like a first communicant of the 50s. The shooting goes on till the end of the afternoon because David takes his time with the child and regularly lets him have a break. Apparently, Americans are stricter than we are about child actors working hard.
Mrs. Tremont from Meals on Wheels, who appear in the diary and then we actually see in second season, are relevant, for a lot of different reasons, some of which I'll mention. I think that Laura had such an instinct about herself and a sadness about her own behavior and yet a bewilderment. And so she still had the hope in her that by accomplishing some redeeming acts, she could be somehow forgiven and saved, if you will. Mrs. Tremont is sort of the perfect example of someone who might be forgiving of someone like Laura. And Laura, I think, wanted to live as long as Mrs. Tremont. So I think the whole Meals on Wheels experience is a manifestation of how to give back and redeem oneself and try and be as pure as possible, all the while knowing that behind your smile there's this, great weight and darkness.
Saturday, September 31st, 16th day. Shooting in Laura and her friend Donna's high school in a clean and pretty little town, about 30 miles from Seattle. First shot, students coming out of school. To help actors and extras find the right rhythm, David puts on some music, which makes their movements more natural, lilsome, and fluid. This may have been the scene in which Bobby and Laura speak and say goodbye after school, which, if this is the case, now's a good time to share a wonderful story. The song played during the scene is named A Real Indication, and is of course a Badalamenti and Lynch composition. Let's hear it from Lynch.
One time I was in New York City, and we were working at Excalibur Sound with Angelo, and we were working on a track with some great players, and we got the track complete, and I had a page of lyrics, and I said to Angelo, I got to find somebody to do these lyrics to the track we just finished. And Angelo said, I would like to do them. Now, I'd been working with Angelo for quite a while by then, and I'd hear sometimes Angelo, when he was working out the music, he would sing some of my lyrics. And it was so embarrassing to me. But I just let him do it, but it just was sort of pathetic. And I sort of looked at Angelo, and I didn't want to hurt his feelings. And he said, no, David, I would like to do those. So I was kind of caught, and I said, all right, okay, Angelo, go in and, give it a try. Thinking, he'll see that it didn't work and we'll find somebody. So Angelo went into the vocal booth, and he got ready. They tested the volume on the microphone. Artie did. Artie, a great guy, great engineer. So Artie said, are you ready, Angelo? I'm looking in there, and I just said, this isn't going to happen. And Angelo said, I'm ready. He had the lyrics in a piece of paper, and the track started, and Angelo knocked this thing out of the park. It was unbelievable what he did. He got me laughing so hard. Luckily, the mic didn't pick it up. But I was laughing so hard, at one point, I had a belly laugh that buckled me over, and I felt and almost heard something like a light bulb bursting in my stomach. And Angelo gave me a hernia.
I was in a lot of pain, but I didn't know what I had, so I went up to Washington to shoot. I was in so much pain that they brought a woman doctor over who was just beautiful, and she examined me and said, "You've got a hernia." I said, "I've got to shoot this film," and she said, "That's okay, but you need to get an operation when you finish." I had to mostly sit down during the shoot.
I got a real indication of the laugh coming on.
Wednesday, September 25th, 19th day of shooting. Location, Laura's house. This house, where the pilot was shot, is smallish, very clean, with white walls and white or pinkish beige curtains, little pink garlands painted over the windows, and an unbelievable amount of knickknacks. The floors are protected with large pieces of cardboard. The lady of the house retired graciously to her kitchen with a prop bin. With David's agreement, Mary Sweeney, the editor, shows us some rough cuts. School out, a dialogue between Laura and the log lady, and a scene with Bobby and Laura. These scenes are superb, very intense, and I discover an unexpected Cheryl Lee, enhanced under remarkable lighting and direction. This actress with the clean-cut look, who could have seemed a bit too demure for the part, turns out to be a genuine Lynch heroine. Monday, September 30th, 23rd day. While we shoot a short scene with Laura and Bobby, a small team shoots landscapes with cars and a shot of Teresa Banks' body drifting along the river. The camera had to be seen on the opposite bank of the river, so the technicians climbed into a raft led by 3 men in rubber suits. Tuesday, October 1st, 24th day. Frank Silva, who plays the part of Bob, joins in. He is very popular with the crew, who gives him a warm welcome. An occasional actor, he had originally been hired as a set dresser on the pilot of Twin Peaks. While watching Frank dress Laura Palmer's bedroom, the dark idea of Bob appeared in David's mind. Friday, October 4th, 27th day. Tough night. We were supposed to shoot the scene where Laura falls off Jane's motorcycle and runs, then several shoots near Jacques' cabin a few miles away. The first scene takes place at a crossing of two narrow shoulderless roads, which makes driving the vehicle and setting up our equipment difficult. A broken-down railroad bridge adds a suitably ominous gloom to the place. The stunt woman does 4 takes. It's not easy, and all the more courageous since she is only wearing black stockings and a mini skirt so short we can see her garters. Time for another story break from set. We'll hear again from assistant director Deepak Nair. The story, in short, is about an ill-placed bet against Lynch. We were on nights. One thing you can be sure of with David's films is that you'll be shooting nights at least 30% of the time. And one day David said, "So tell me, hotshot, what time do you think we'll finish on Saturday? We're gonna finish before midnight." I told him that was impossible because we wouldn't wrap the Friday night shoot until Saturday morning and couldn't do the fast turnaround. Nonetheless, at 2 on Saturday afternoon, I get a call from David, and he says, "Where are you? I'm waiting for you at the lunch table. You're wasting time on purpose." I said, "Nobody's going to be at the set but the Teamsters." And he said, "See, you're always sabotaging." At that point, we made a $20 bet about when we would finish. I arrived on set that afternoon, and I was right. Nobody was there but 4 crew members, and when the first Teamsters arrived, he had a look on his face like, "Am I late?" Word begins to get around about this bet David and I have, and the crew gets to work. At one point, Cheryl needed to leave the set to change clothes, and David says, "Nonsense, you're wasting time. Bring her clothes here. You guys, form a circle facing outward and Cheryl can change in the middle." Finally, at 2 minutes to midnight, he looks at me and says, "Do you want to call it a wrap or should I?" I said, "David, you deserve it. You call it." I gave him $20, then turned around and took $100 from a producer. I'd bet against myself, and he was so angry. He said, "You're buying drinks for everybody." And he made me spend the money I made on drinks. Tuesday, October 8th, 28th day. Back to the studio and pre-lighting of Partyland, a night spot where Laura lures the naive Donna into her dark world. According to David's indications, the set is strikingly ugly. It's a large place with walls made of face wine-red logs. Worn and sleazy carpeting of the same shade covers the floor. In a raised area, some tables and wooden benches. The floor is littered with cigarette butts, and on the walls hangs a garland of purplish light bulbs. Wednesday, October 9th, 29th day. Shooting at Partyland. About 40 extras, mostly youths, and a small band of musicians. The wardrobe people have done a fine job. Lots of girls in more or less torn jeans and both strapless brassieres. Others wear thigh-high boots or mesh stockings like those of Pigalle bar girls. Laura's transformation is striking. From a well-behaved schoolgirl, she has turned into a real siren in black miniskirt, black stockings, and thigh-high boots. Donna seems completely lost in her little pleated skirt and socks. Once more, I am surprised by the sparsity of the lighting. 3 fixtures fitted with about 15, no more than 25-watt bulbs, 2 gelatinized projectors, 6 neon tubes, and 1 stroboscopic spotlight. That's all. Thursday, October 10th, 30th day. Follow-up on Partyland, shooting under a record and overpowering temperatures of 42 Celsius, making the headlines of all the papers. A heavy smoke fills the set up to its low ceiling. Some technicians wear a mask, and David, unruffled, his usual favorite woolen jacket with a hole in the elbow. He dismisses all the people not absolutely indispensable on the set, keeping only the camera team, the assistant, the gaffer, and the script supervisor, who says everything goes wonderfully well. Friday, October 11th, 31st day. The Red Room. One of the main characters haunting that eerie set is a little person, referred to as the man from another place. Michael Anderson does not quite reach the size of an average man. He is cheerful, pleasant, and smiling. A genuine grace exudes from his whole being, especially when he dances. In that scene, the camera rolls backwards, and this is also the way the little person says his lines and moves about. In the film, of course, picture and sound will roll forward, but a strange effect of misadjustment results. The script supervisor shows a line to Michael, who repeats them backwards after an infinitesimal lapse. We are fascinated by his virtuosity, which has already made him famous.
Do you know who I am?
Monday, October 14th, 32nd day. Set, the Roadhouse nightclub. A bar, tables, chairs, and a small stage where a singer performs in a pale gray tulle dress with ruffles. Julie Cruz, the singer who has made a name for herself, already appeared in the pilot. In this scene, she sings a very pretty, yearning, and ingenuous song, a Badalamenti tune on David's lyrics, which makes Laura break into tears. With our first mention of Julie Cruz, I'm going to make up for the fact that I didn't talk about her in my last video. Julie Cruz first met Lynch in 1985. She had been working as a talent scout for Angelo Badalamenti, who at the time was composing Mysteries of Love for the Blue Velvet soundtrack.
I kept in contact with Angelo throughout the years, about 4 years past, and I do different industrials for him and commercials and just about anything that came along where I'd find singers for him. And one day he called me up out of the blue and said, I'm doing this film, it's called Blue Velvet, and I need this real angelic type of singer for it. And, of course he would never consider me because I was a belter. I was too loud, I was too brassy.
Julie recommended a few girls and tried it out, and David wasn't thrilled.
He rejected like 6 of my singers, which really, I got real irritated with him, and I was being sarcastic actually on the phone, and I said, well, just let me do it then. And he said, well, okay, you do it. Well, then, he called my bluff and the terror set in. And I called in sick. I tried to change the key. The music had no meter. It was just this spacious, vast melody without any breath, without anything, just kind of ominous. So, what I would do, I'd call my mother and I'd set the phone down and I'd say, okay, Mom, how's this sound, And he wanted me to sing it in an accent, but then not in an accent. So those were the type of directions given to me.
And we worked in my office, and she positioned her voice at a certain place, and we went into a studio and did it, and it was just fantastic. David heard it and flipped out.
In an interview for The Guardian in 2017, Cruz said, I actually never sang in that trademark Julie Cruz voice before I worked with Angelo and David. I was always a real belter with lots of power. Working with them changed me. Badalamenti and Lynch felt some very specific, powerful magic in Cruz, and the two of them would write and produce many of the songs that would appear in her debut, Floating into the Night. The scene in which she appears before the reveal of Laura's killer in Season 2, where she slowly fades away and is replaced by the giant saying, "It is happening again," is one of my favorites from the original series. Her beautiful voice appears in Fire Walk With Me with Questions and a World of Blue. In the scene, the song washes away all of Laura's walls. We see her in a public moment of vulnerability, weeping while she listens. Why did you go? Why did you turn away from me? When all the world seemed to sing, why? Why did you go? Was it me? Was it you? Questions in a world of blue. It's a stunningly beautiful scene.
Yeah, I did a song a real tear-jerking song in the Roadhouse where I'm wearing a blue formal. Why I would be wearing a blue formal in a biker roadhouse, I don't know why, but I'm in it and I'm singing a beautiful song called Questions in a World of Blue. It'll be the next single off of the new soundtrack.
Now, did David write that?
Yes.
Yeah?
Thursday, October 17th, 35th day. Location, Donna Hayward's house. Cheryl seems a little tired, but she perks up as soon as she is on. We are shooting the sequence where Donna tries to remember the nightmare of her night at Partyland. The two friends crying in each other's arms. The scene is really moving, and David, very enthusiastic, warmly encourages the two actresses. When I also congratulate Cheryl, she answers, "It's so easy and so wonderful to play with David." I reply telling her that even a crack fiddler needs a good violin to make beautiful music. I want to take a beat here and use this as an example of how Donna's new actor, Moira Kelly, brings out a softer, more vulnerable side of the character. Laura Flynn Boyle, as stated earlier, did not reprise her role for this movie due to scheduling conflicts with Wayne's World. Boyle brought Donna to life, and when I think of Donna, I picture her. I have nothing against Boyle, and I think her lingering soap-influenced performance was perfect for the original show. But Kelly brings a tenderness here which I never felt from Boyle, even in her own more emotional scenes. As a viewer, the recast takes a beat to get used to, but the process is brief, as Moira Kelly perfectly embodies Donna's naivete.
Why
Why do you do it?
Monday, October 21st, 37th day. Jacques' cabin, interior. It's a tiny set, less than 24 square yards. The set is off limits for everybody, not only because of its exiguity, but mostly because of the nature of the scene. Now and then, we hear screaming coming from within the cabin. On lunch break, the actors leave the set, their mouths smeared with lipstick. Let's take a moment here to point out a specific bit of imagery one Lynch returns to again and again. That of a tattered woman with messy, blood-red lipstick smeared about her face. This is purely speculation here, but I can't help but think about a moment very often cited by Lynch as pivotal in his life and worldview. Let's hear the story from Lynch himself.
There's a story when I lived in Boise, Idaho on Park Circle Drive. One night, I think it was around 9:30. You know, in the 50s, in small towns, there were street lights, but they were dimmer than the lights of today. And it was near a street light, near a street called Shoshone Avenue. And across the way, I was with my younger brother. Out of the darkness came a woman, completely naked, and she had skin the color of milk. And she wasn't walking quite properly. I didn't understand exactly what was wrong, and there might have been some blood on her mouth. She was pretty much oblivious to me and my brother as she came out of the darkness and walked and sat down on a curb. And I never seen an adult woman naked, and it was quite a powerful experience. And I knew that she was hurt and trouble, and I wanted to help her, but I didn't know what to do. It's not every day that you see a battered nude woman come out of the bushes, but these kind of things happen. And in this story, this happened.
Tuesday, October 22nd, 38th day. We were again with Miss Tremont and her grandson still wearing his first communicant suit. This time the set is a big oblong bedroom. Its 3 windows are partially blocked with blackened, burnt, and parched cardboards and newspapers, making a very strange and beautiful collage. The room is scantily furnished. A collapsed couch, a formica table, a few chairs, and 3 big radios in the style of the 30s. The other inhabitants are the man from another place, a second smaller gentleman in white makeup, an electrician, 2 woodsmen, and Bob. Once more, we shoot with 2 cameras rolling backwards under the stroboscopic light set at 60 pulsations per second. Michael acts as the dialogue coach. The scene, terribly dark, also reveals itself very difficult to manage. Ken Scherer, chief operating officer at Lynch Frost Productions, confesses to me he can't figure it out but claims, "I know it's going to be a great moment." This is the common feeling. After the long shots, David shoots extreme close-ups of the mouths of the actors, speaking and screaming. For this purpose, he uses a special lens, one generally used only in the field of medicine. This is a scene I can imagine being terribly alienating for an audience, perhaps even for some of the die-hard fans. There are so many little moments like this throughout the movie, these small glimpses into the world Lynch has created in his own mind, moments in which he takes no care to explain, or even particularly contextualize. This is one of the things that I love about Lynch, and one of the things that detractors don't. He makes art for himself. What narrative purpose does this scene serve? How does it move the story along? Where does it sit in the story that is being told? These are all questions Lynch has the answer to, and he allows the viewer to find it in their own answers, rather than tell it to them. Those who have watched The Return know just how intrinsically the world of Twin Peaks ties together, and this scene is a large part of that.
But the thing is, life doesn't always make sense at all. So why do we expect art to? You know, weird things happen in life all the time. Things that don't make any logical sense. It's like dreams, you know. I mean, stepping into this world is kind of like a dream world where anything can happen. But in real life, we have deja vus and coincidences that seem so bizarre. How could they actually happen? But yet they do. I've heard ghost stories, you know, the things that really happen to people that seem just as bizarre as anything that ever happened on the show.
Thursday, October 31st, 45th day. Set, interior of railroad car. Laura Palmer's death. This is a perfect duplicate of Seattle's set. The painting and patina work is remarkable. The car really gives the impression of having rotten away in an old depot for the past 50 years. Laura and Ronette are striking with bloody mouths and black circles around their eyes. This scene is physically very difficult. Laura lies at a slant on her belly over a mirror handled by Leland, in which his and Bob's faces reflect themselves one after the other. Seeing her image in the mirror, then the two men's faces, lit with a white intermittent light, very harsh on the eyes, Laura is tormented through several takes. Cheryl unleashes a tremendous energy in this scene. What a transformation from the nice girl player of the beginning to the great actress she has become. Between two shots, David announces that Cheryl would like to say a word to the crew. He hands her the megaphone, and Cheryl thanks all the technicians with great emotion and kindness. "I love you all. You have helped me make this movie. I'll never forget you." Then she offers each of them a lighter on which is engraved, "Twin Peaks, Fire Walk with Me." Cheryl Lee's performance in this movie is nothing short of incredible. Her ability to shift seamlessly from emotion to emotion perfectly captures how Laura herself is able to adapt to the person she is with at that moment.
What would you say is the most interesting thing that we learn about Laura Palmer in the movie? It's the most unusual thing that kind of stood out in your mind.
I think it's that she is so different with each person that she's with. You know what I mean?
Multiple personalities?
Yeah, in a way. And a lot of that has to do with the drug problem, I think. But, you know, like with James is the one that she really loves. And it's like, if I show you all of myself, will you still love me? You know, she feels like she can't show him everything. So then she has to go and have Jacques and these truckers and Bobby and, you know, she gets very wild.
There are moments where her performance borders on the over-exaggerated. And just as it seems it is at the tipping point, it becomes something else. Something that feels realer than reality. Acting that captures her internal despair more than any naturalistic performance could. Cheryl Lee is able to channel something here that is worth admiring, worth remembering. It's the performance of a lifetime. The end of this movie could not be any more beautiful. It is here that the scope of her character is revealed. The world of Twin Peaks we are presented to in the show is not the same as the one Laura experiences. While the show itself is still dark, it is very much balanced with the light. This is a town, as Cooper puts it, where a yellow light means slow down, not speed up. There is a warmth there, cherry pie and black coffee, the camaraderie of the Bookhouse Boys, the overdramatic naivete of young infatuation. For Laura, Twin Peaks is a very cold place. It seems everywhere she goes, a blind eye is turned. I think that Bobby's monologue during her funeral summarizes this perfectly, where he screams, "All you good people! You want to know who killed Laura? You did! We all did." I want now to quote the book Devil's Advocate, written by Lindsay Hallam, as I don't believe that I could word the impact of the ending any more beautifully than she did. She wrote, "Laura's experience, central to her final week of life, is her discovery of a deeper, larger truth, that the world that has completely failed her is not the only one that exists. While there is danger that Laura's death can thus be viewed as a self-sacrifice, a form of martyrdom that sees her suffer in this world in order to be rewarded in the afterlife, I would instead see Laura's discovery and entry into this new world as a testament of her strength. Her status as a victim is overturned, for while she may be comforted in the final scene by Cooper, part of why Cooper is there is because he did what Laura did, confronted his worst fear, and was consumed by it, while Laura steadfastly refused to surrender. This is not the story of how she came to die, but rather the story that reveals how Laura is in fact the strongest of them all." Principal photography is now complete. David Lynch has 6 months to finish the film before its premiere at Cannes. The film would be edited by longtime collaborator Mary Sweeney, who worked on almost all of Lynch's films since Blue Velvet. Lynch has a complex and arguably flawed relationship with women in his life, and he had begun to have an affair with Sweeney during the production of Wild at Heart, when he was still in a relationship with Isabella Rossellini. By the time editing began on Fire Walk with Me, she was pregnant with Lynch's child.
One audience member who will soon have a keener understanding of Lynch's material is his newborn son, the child of Lynch's girlfriend, film editor Mary Sweeney.
Now we finally come to the movie's premiere at Cannes on May 16, 1992. There were at least 2 screenings of the film that day, one early screening for press and critics, the second being the official world premiere that followed a red carpet event with Lynch, Sweeney, and Ingalls in attendance. The film was immediately divisive.
This movie contains a lot of sex, a lot of violence, a lot of sexual violence, in fact. So I pose the question to you, are you both ready to take a lot of heat for this film? Do you know you guys are going to take some real interesting interview questions?
We live in an oven.
Yeah.
That's how much heat we're going to take.
Yeah.
But that's always the way it is. Mm-hmm. And the world is you want everyone to love what you do, but it never happens, and it never is going to.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate.
Allegedly, during the critics' screening, audience members hissed and booed the film.
I don't think about who's going to go in and see the picture. I just get these ideas and start going to work. And then this is the most horrendous time, is releasing the picture and seeing what people say. And it's a torture sometimes.
And during the press conference that followed, Lynch was met with open hostility. Lynch was asked by a French reporter if his return to the world of Twin Peaks was the result of a lack of inspiration. Another reporter declared, "Many would define you as a very perverse director. Would you agree?" Quentin Tarantino was on hand and made the observation, "He's disappeared so far up his own ass that I have no desire to see another David Lynch movie."
There's some things that are going on these days that we're attacking films for violence and not doing a whole lot in the world for violence. And film is a safe place to have experiences. Violence exists. It has a major part in a lot of fantastic stories. If it was championing violence, it would be one thing, and I don't think this film is. So I believe in very strong films, and I don't apologize to them one bit, as long as there's a balance, to the thing.
When asked about the reception at Cannes, Sheryl Lee felt fortunate to not be in attendance. "I couldn't go to Cannes because I was doing a play in New York, and I was really bummed, but when I heard about the reception the film got, it's probably a blessing that I wasn't there. I don't know if my skin would have been thick enough to deal with it. It's not a comfortable film to sit through, and sometimes when an audience sees a film that makes them uncomfortable, they get angry at the director. I think there was some of that going on. I don't think it's David's intention to provoke people, but rarely do people see anything of his and say, 'Oh, that's interesting.' His work always has complexity and depth and layers of meaning, and it can be upsetting for people if they feel like they're supposed to understand a film, but they can't distill it down into a simple story."
There's never been a film of mine anyway that everyone likes. So people seem to be violently divided, and it's just the way it is. And then some time goes by, and then the film seems to have a different, it's regarded differently, 6 months later or a year later. But when they first see a film, it's many strange reactions.
In Sweeney's view, the rough ride the film was given at Cannes came down to the fact that people were addicted to Twin Peaks and wanted more of it, and they got a David Lynch film instead. Fire Walk with Me is dark and unrelenting, and it made people angry.
In the film, there is a lot of sex and there is some violence. If you had the freedom to do that on television in the series, would you have done it that way?
There isn't. There were many things on the television show that approached what is in the film. The film is just a little bit farther, it was amazing how far, Twin Peaks went on television, to me.
The elephant in the room here has a name, which, due to YouTube monetization purposes, I will refer to as familial abuse.
I think that this story of incest kept a lot of people away from that film, but it's something that goes on, and it's certainly part of Laura Palmer's life.
The film's tireless depiction of Laura's abuse at the hands of her father is upfront and explicit. It's by no means an easy movie to sit through. Lynch not only depicts the brutal reality of Laura's life, but also portrays how her perception of reality becomes distorted, offering a more comprehensive understanding of the trauma caused by this kind of abuse. In the show, Laura's father Leland, under the supernatural control of the entity Bob, is revealed to be the killer. One of the biggest critiques of the show was how Bob's possession excused Leland's crimes. Esteemed author Diane Hume George wrote that the series participates in excusing male violence towards women, mythologizing their behavior as possession by evil forces that originate outside of the self. The evil does not reside in normal, troubled, tragic human lives, but in helplessly possessed male victims who do not know what they are doing and cannot be held responsible. Fire Walk with Me vindicates the Twin Peaks mythology by providing a heart-shatteringly accurate portrayal of childhood trauma. Lynch takes great care to show how, although Leland is possessed by Bob, he is still a willing participant. Laura's ability to resist Bob's possession shows that, even in the face of darkness, there is always a choice. It suggests that we have the power to resist the pull of evil, much like the choice we make when deciding between right and wrong. The film's dedication to illustrating Laura's experience is also apparent with her misidentification of Leland as Bob. This is a common symptom experienced by individuals with post-traumatic stress disorder, known as splitting. It describes a mental process in which a person compartmentalizes various aspects of their identity, experiences, and emotions connected to the traumatic event. Victims might not only fragment their own identity into different personalities as a defense mechanism, but they may also divide the abuser in a similar way, often seeing them as both a good and a bad figure. In the film, Laura is in denial about the true identity of Bob. Who are you really is a question she returns to again and again despite the clear evidence she discovers. Leland's first victim, Teresa Banks, however, has no such issue. When we watch Teresa's untimely death, Bob is nowhere to be seen. Jennifer Lynch says that we only see Leland during Teresa's murder because the mind and the heart would much rather put a different face on the monster than see someone's father. And to Teresa, it didn't matter. What mattered was that whoever needed him to be someone else saw him as someone else. All of this to say, Fire Walk with Me is a grueling watch that entrancingly mirrors real-life horrors that some would rather look away from. Reflecting on the negative reviews, Lynch said, "Anyhow, people were finished with Twin Peaks, and Fire Walk with Me didn't go over well at Cannes. It was just one of those times in life when you can't get arrested. Oh man, that was a horrible, horrible, stressful time, and I got really sick. And when you're down, people just love to kick you. But it could have been worse. Like I said, with Dune, I died twice because I didn't believe in the work I'd done, and it flopped. I only died once after Fire Walk with Me, so it wasn't nearly so bad. You don't like the film? Fine. I like it, and you really can't hurt me. Well, you can hurt me a little bit, but I still really like the film. Ray and Grace and Cheryl, the Palmers are fantastic, and I love their world. I recovered pretty quickly from Fire Walk with Me and bounced back and got to work. It's not about being tough either. It's about getting ideas that you fall in love with. And I just stayed home and worked. I didn't ever really like going outside the house, and now I really don't like it." But there were those at Cannes who did appreciate the film, like Gilles Jacob, who is the CEO of the Cannes Festival in 1992. Here is what he had to say regarding the reception of the world premiere. "For me, Lynch is one of the greatest living filmmakers. Making a film after a series made it even more difficult, and he did it beautifully. People whistle because they think the film is treating them low, when it's not about understanding, it's about feeling. Lynch's dreamlike nature, underlined by Badalamenti's musical, immerses the viewer into a unique universe with his characters, his zigzag decorations, his stylized lights, his so particular dialogues. The film. I was at the evening session, and the film was not booed, but applauded. At the world premiere, it received a standing ovation.
Un mélange de sifflements et d'applaudissements juste après la projection, des réactions comme d'habitude très controversées pour David Lynch, ce qui ne l'empêche pas de toute façon d'avoir le succès que l'on sait.
Directly after Cannes, Fire Walk with Me opened in Japan on May 16th, and it did exceedingly well.
Diane, I have a strange hunch. Is the murder of Laura Palmer really the end, or just the beginning? In any case, I am absolutely certain that the key to the solution of this riddle is hidden within this film.
Twin Peaks. Dorama. 最後の7日間.
Historically, the Japanese love Twin Peaks.
In Japan, there is full-fledged Twin Peaks mania. Everywhere you look, there are hats, buttons, books, and magazines. A 14-tape set of the entire Twin Peaks saga has sold more than 30,000 copies.
The Diary of Laura Palmer has now been translated into Japanese, and sales have been more than brisk. So far, 250,000 copies have been sold.
There was a whole movement there in 1992 called Twin Peaks Mania. Because of the rabid public interest, Nippon Herald Films rushed to open the movie in Japan. They went as far as staging mock funerals for Laura Palmer to generate publicity.
Though the movie's only been out a week in the States, it's topped the box office in Japan for months, where Twin Peaks fever reaches epic proportions. Kyle says it was on a trip to Tokyo that he got his first real taste of how big the show had truly become.
I went to this television show and taped this half-hour segment that went out live. When I came out, there were hundreds of people outside, screaming people, because I'd been on the television show and they knew where the studio was. And I'd never come up against that before. And, you feel very vulnerable. You're sort of like, whoa, they just wanted me and lots of them, and how am I going to get to my car? And how am I going to get out of here?
Having rounded up many of the principals from Twin Peaks for Fire Walk with Me, Lynch corralled a few of them for a series of Georgia coffee commercials. They made 4 commercials with the mystery told in sequential order that aired exclusively in Japan. If you're interested in David Lynch's commercials, I just released a whole history of David Lynch commercials, so check it out. When the film debuted in U.S. theaters on August 18th, the reception was even poorer than that at Cannes.
In this film prequel to the series, he creates a mood you rarely see at the movies, eye-glazing boredom. I think they called the film Fire Walk with Me because after an hour of the film, you'd rather be firewalking.
Famed critic Robert Ebert, who had already questionably skewered Blue Velvet and Lynch himself in the past, wrote of the film, "I thought the new Lynch was a shockingly bad film, simple-minded and scornful of its audience, which could only be defended with the wheezy, so-bad-it's-good routine." Rita Kempley for the Washington Post wrote in her review, Laura Palmer is exhumed most cruelly in David Lynch's Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me, the perversely moving, profoundly self-indulgent prequel of the director's darkly comic TV series. Memorable moments and ludicrous ones collide in this psychic autopsy, a weirdly fundamentalist cogitation on the intersection of heaven, hell, and Washington state. Fans of the dark comedy will find little to laugh about, unless it's Lynch's pretentiousness and this horrific look at Laura's last 7 days.
I'm not worried about the killer striking again. I'm worried about David Lynch striking again. Even what worked on TV doesn't always work in a film. One example, the close-up on a mouthful of creamed corn, real close. That happened in the TV series more than once. I still don't know what it means, but it was repulsive enough on a 27-inch TV screen. Imagine it on a movie screen 30 feet wide. Not a lot of people are going to be running out of their seats to the refreshment stand during this one. And at 2.5 hours, you know why Special Agent Cooper needs a good cup of joe to stay awake. At least it's not on ABC.
Yeah, right. Hate the movie, loved the review.
What you will find, though, if you dig deep, is that devoted fans of Twin Peaks at the time, those who spent time in forums discussing the world, were for the most part deeply enthralled and amazed by the movie. On the amazing alt.tv.Twin Peaks forum, a man named Bob wrote,
"I was on holiday last week, and as I was passing a cinema, I spotted a poster for the Twin Peaks sequel. A quick check of the timetable. The show started in 10 minutes. So what did I do? Go in and see it, of course. Right from the first notes of music, any long-term Peaks addict will find themselves back in familiar territory, finding out about the first murder. Despite this, it comes as quite a shock. when after about half an hour, a familiar signpost appears and the corresponding theme music plays. It is nearly as big a surprise to have Laura Palmer actually walking and talking with other members of the cast. Lynch had the problem of telling a story which we already know the outcome and a lot of the details of. He gets around this by telling the story from the point of view of the one person we have not really heard from in this series, Laura. The usual twists and turns and odd angles on people and events are all there, with some very cleverly done scenes distorting the entire interpretation of the earlier series. If you liked the original, undiluted Twin Peaks, you'll like this one too. And there are enough hooks to hang another sequel on, to let us know what happened to the other characters. Bob.
Of course, not all fans responded this way, as just like with any form of media, people will want and expect different things. Fire Walk with Me was way off the wall, even for Twin Peaks fans. There were detractors, and others came to the defense of the movie. I love this post by Scott.
Yeah, if you mean by good acting, the regular descent into tear-filled histrionics that are barely justified and not especially convincing. About halfway through the movie, I was hoping Leland would hurry up and kill her so she would stop crying all the time.
Regular as compared to what? Barely justified? If being regularly raped by your father since the age of 12, not to mention being bombarded by Bob's desire to take away your body and keep you prisoner in it for 50 or 60 years. Sure, I'd call that barely reason to cry once or twice, or be scared, or to lose your mind and go on coke binges to forget your pain, or do anything else that might lessen the pain. Sure, I see your point almost immediately. As for convincing, well, I'm sure it's pretty easy for us all to be familiar with what kind of person a victim of all of the above would be like.
On the whole, I thought her acting job was pretty wretched, and the only real recommendation I could give is go see the movie if you want to see Cheryl Lee's breast. Other than that, filming this movie was a pretty big mistake, as it tries to embody the mystery of Laura Palmer and merely reduces her to a whiny and less than sympathetic little twit. It really may not be something Lynch could have changed. This series was driven and empowered by the very mysterious nature of Laura. They removed that.
A little more than half of Twin Peaks occurred after Laura's murder was solved. How does that embody her mystery? If you think Laura in Fire Walk with Me was unsympathetic, I'd hate to be judged by you. Whiny? You'd whine a little if your father was you. What's the problem with a movie that isn't driven on the mystery of how she wound up dead, but driven on how she wound up dead? I thought Fire Walk with Me was not only driving, but also intense and incredibly suspenseful. I think Lynch and Ingalls really turned our foreknowledge of the ending into a strength.
I was disappointed.
I'm really sorry you feel that way because I'm thrilled with Fire Walk with Me. The explanations are shocking and interesting. The possibilities are open. And the passion play mythology, I think shown for the first time to their potential, as the snippets we got of LMFAP and Bob and Red Room stuff in the series was way too few and far between. Scott. Jennifer Lynch remembers, Fire Walk with Me was really important to Dad, and I remember his terrible confusion at how it was misunderstood. He started to have a lot of trouble with Hollywood bullshit around that time. Ray Wise feels that the film requires no explanation or apology. Fire Walk with Me is David's masterpiece, he said. Every aspect of his work is embodied in that film, and the fact that it was a prequel to a television series? Only in the mind of David Lynch could something like that happen, and he executed it beautifully. There's a scene in the film where I'm in a convertible with Laura, and I think that's some of the best work I've ever done. It was very hot the day we shot that scene, and there were lots of different takes, and we were all kind of short-tempered. But we used that tension and channeled it into the work. And the last 20 minutes of the film are almost like a religious experience. People were hard on Fire Walk with Me when it came out, but I think the film has been reassessed and will be around for a long time. And I think Ray Wise could not be any more correct. Thank you guys so much for making it to the end of this video. Thank you for watching, and thank you to all of my lovely Patreon supporters and channel members. I genuinely could not do this without you. You keep my channel running and you support me in every possible way. Thank you. If you guys aren't already, please consider checking out my Patreon. I do full unedited reactions of movies over there and extra content, and it's just a great way to talk to me if you feel like it, and it's a great community, so check it out. Wow. Thank you guys. Until next time, Camcorder Cameron signing out.